What do you think is the freest example of a nation state or of a territory that we have today? Maybe even classifying it by the nation state is not the right move there. But like, where would you say has the greatest potential for long-term freedom? Like that would be most aligned with this parallel system that is actively being built?
Yeah, maybe the bit surprising answer might be the oceans.
Yeah.
On the high seas has been anarchy for centuries. There is no single global ruler of the high seas. And if you're a captain of a ship, you have a substantial amount of real autonomy. And, cruise ships, for example, are dictatorships on a boat, ultimately.
A dictatorship, pun intended. Yeah.
Literally, yeah. By the way, a lot of our legal concepts come from maritime law, citizenship as another example. The point at where a cruise ship loses its sovereignty is when it goes to port. Right? Then it has to become accustomed in the national waters and the port facility specifically, and has to sign a bunch of contracts to be allowed to get in there. But now imagine a cruise ship that never has to go back to a port. And what if the cruise ship simply stays out in the high seas, non-stop? And smaller vessels come and go and dock and bring supplies and people and whatnot. But all of a sudden, there you have an actual possibility of legal anarchy in the currently defined existing set of rules. So the Seasteading Institute is really fascinating to follow, and they've made phenomenal progress over the last couple of years. There's ultimately, in order to make this long-term sustainable on a holistic, like pragmatic front, we ultimately need three things. We need to have a flag to put on the vessel, right? Because that means that you kind of have an anchoring to a certain nationality, and that gives you, in the current legal context, a bunch of protections. The second is that you need to have a insurance, right? Because if you cannot insure a boat, the cost of it is way too high. So insurance incredibly useful for cost-efficient risk reallocation. But in order to get insurance, you need the third thing, which is a classification of this type of vessel. Because a fisher boat is different from a cruise ship, is different from a oil drilling rig, right, in the high seas. These are all different seagoing vessels that have a different type of classification. And we need now in order to get such a classification, you basically need to have a body of engineers defining exactly what this type of vessel is. In the realm of a seastead, it would be an ocean-going vessel that does not have a motor, right? It's not self-propelling. It needs to be tugged, but it can float and can be anchored for locational stability. Yeah, we can basically get the insurances, get the flagging agency. The cool thing is the flagging agencies are private companies, ultimately, right? And there's a huge competition. Every Caribbean island, every country with a port, with an ocean, and even some that don't have oceans, have these flagging agencies, and they're very happy to compete for business. So that problem is already solved. And right now what the Seasteading Institute is solving is that panel of engineers defining the classification of a seastead. And once that is done, insurance shouldn't be that hard. And yeah, there's multiple companies building these seasteads already now. You can buy them for not even that much. I think it's like $150,000, $200,000 for the small edition. The luxurious editions go into the millions, of course, but they don't have to be.
Okay, this is a rabbit hole that I clearly need to go deeper down here. Okay, so I mean, how feasible is it to be able to do that on a long-term basis? Like, I mean, I guess you need to have obviously either, I guess, some sort of contact with the shore in the sense that you need to provision yourselves, assuming it's not self-sustaining. I don't know how many, you can obviously grow things, like you'll have plenty of good sunshine out at the open sea, right? Fresh water is a difficult one. So I don't know if they have like desalination rigs on board and things like that, but how sustainable is that from a long-term perspective of if you want to completely stay out of any jurisdiction? And can these actually be classified as their own states, like their own nations eventually? I know there was some, what's the, you'll know this, the one, a guy did this, right? He built out his own, I think it was on an old oil rig, and he built out his own nation essentially. He was the citizen of his own nation. Do you remember, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there have been a couple pioneer seasteaders, many of them killed or hunted. So unfortunately, that's always kind of in the early days. The early Bitcoiners are also all tortured, kidnapped, and in jail nowadays. So we have that in common. But yeah, this is absolutely possible. In terms of self-sufficiency, you need electricity to produce anything, right? So, but for that, solars and battery, totally fine. Weight is not that much of an issue, actually. More weight is better for seagoing vessels. They kind of are more stable. So the weight of batteries is totally fine. Then you can run a desalination plant. And there are some prototypes that have them purely running off the solar, and they produce enough water for the family. So that's fine. Food, I mean, you can fish. Actually, when you put these vessels into the ocean, you can design them in such a way that it builds like this layer of mineral crust or something, which basically turns your boat into a coral reef. And if you have a boat that needs to go fast through the water, you want to design to prevent that, because that creates more surface area, more drag, etc. But if you're stationary, you don't care. In fact, it actually benefits you because it's a protection against corrosion. Right? So your steel in the vessel doesn't corrode away. And then with this, you just get a coral reef, and there will be an insane amount of fish around your habitat. So you just, pick one up, and there's food. Not as good as a cow, yes. But I don't know, maybe you can get like a big like shark or something that might be equivalent to cow meat.
Or bring you could probably have a goat, depending on the size of this. You could probably have a goat on board.
Yeah.
If you wanted to at least produce some dairy products. If you're in that, you can plenty of good cheese and goat's milk can come out of that.
Yeah, like so the president of the Seasteading Institute, his wife is not yet convinced about living on a boat in the middle of nowhere, and so her criteria for I will go if this happens is if I can walk my dog in grass out on the seastead, then yes, I will go. But we can absolutely put soil on a seastead and grow grass on it. Should totally be fine. We can connect multiple of these pods together to form quite large structures, and definitely have larger areas. Yeah, should be fine.
It reminds me of Snow Crash, obviously. The giant floating city that they had there just kept tying on more and more and more vessels to it, essentially. Slightly less cultish behavior, and for anyone that hasn't read Snow Crash, you absolutely should, because it's a brilliant. It's like that's where metaverse came from, that's where so many things came from, and the idea of like the future or techno-futuristic, kind of corporate state, I think is such a fascinating one. And I think that's basically what Balaji's took his network state from. Like it's essentially a similar thing, slightly more digitized. But so is this something that you're actively looking into doing yourself as well?
No, more like a curiosity hobby. It's a bit too early to really commit to it yet. Unless you want to be an early pioneer funder, which I'm not in a position to do. And so then, but I'd like to in the long-term future. I always like the idea of sailing, like getting a sailboat as one of the bases. I already love living in a caravan, like a camper van. That's already incredibly rewarding. So doing it on the high seas would be fun. I never really was a sailor or like boat person, so it would definitely be a new skill to learn. But yeah, the seastead itself has interesting aspects to it. I definitely wouldn't mind doing it for like a couple weeks of vacation. The thing is, for every dwelling place, you really don't need to be there 24/7 for the entire year, right? Usually we do travel a bit, and it can be more or less for people. But if you just want to stay in a cool Airbnb for 3 weeks, there you have like ocean view 365 degrees. And like zero steps till the waterfront, that's not a bad deal, and you can probably get it for much cheaper than actual beachfront property.